Okay, so let's dive right in. We've got a really interesting set of articles here, all about the Ethiopian economy.
Yeah. Looks like we're going to be talking about
Taxes, regulations, businesses trying to adapt to all these changes, and even some stories about workers who are facing some really tough situations.
Really puts a human face on all of this.
It does. It's going to be fascinating to see how all these seemingly separate things are actually connected.
Yeah, the ripple effects can be surprising sometimes, you know?
Exactly. So how about we kick things off with this whole battle between the banks and the tax authorities?
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Billions of birr are at stake.
Right. It's all about these dividends that banks are using to pay for unpaid shares.
The banks are arguing that these dividends shouldn't be taxed.
Saying it's basically reinvested earnings.
But of course, the tax authorities see things differently.
Of course. And it's already having a real impact. Awash Bank, for example, they've already shelled out a ton of money just fighting this in court. They're saying that if they lose, this could seriously hurt their ability to raise capital.
Especially with those new capital requirements coming from the National Bank of Ethiopia.
Exactly. It's a lot of uncertainty for these banks.
That regulatory uncertainty can be a real killer for investment, you know? If businesses aren't sure what the rules are...
They don't want to take the risk.
Exactly. And to make matters worse,
the Ministry of Finance seems to be divided on the whole issue.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's a draft directive floating around that actually supports the banks.
Ah, interesting.
But it's totally stuck in this bureaucratic limbo.
So the banks are just left hanging, not knowing what's going to happen.
It's a tough spot to be in, for sure. Okay, so we've got banks battling taxes and bureaucracy. What about something completely different, like the rising cost of living for foreign nationals?
Oh yeah, things have gotten a lot tougher for expats in Ethiopia.
It seems like the immigration fees and regulations have gotten much stricter.
Yeah, we've got a story here about an American woman who got hit with a massive penalty.
For overstaying her visa?
Right, but the thing is, she was waiting for her Ethiopian origin ID.
Which took years longer than they promised.
So it's like she was being punished for trying to follow the rules.
It doesn't seem very welcoming to foreign investment, does it?
Not exactly. And we're seeing similar concerns from the Chinese business community.
Longer wait times for work permits.
Huge penalties for overstays.
Some are even talking about moving to Tanzania.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it does make you wonder if these stricter measures are going to backfire.
Driving away the very people and businesses they're trying to attract.
It's a delicate balance, for sure. Okay, enough about immigration woes. Let's talk about pharmaceuticals.
They're having their own showdown with the authorities.
Yeah. This time it's about the value of imported raw materials.
So the pharmaceutical companies are saying that customs officials are inflating the value of those materials,
driving up their production costs.
And of course, those costs get passed along to hospitals and patients.
Higher drug prices for everyone.
It seems like a classic example of a well-intentioned measure having some unintended consequences.
Yeah, they're trying to prevent under-invoicing.
But it could end up hurting the industry and making healthcare less affordable.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. Okay, so speaking of standoffs,
we've got vehicle importers going head-to-head with the Addis Ababa Revenue Bureau.
It's getting pretty heated. Over 100 importers have had their bank accounts frozen.
And 41 have filed lawsuits.
All because of this new pricing system.
The importers are saying it's totally baseless.
While the authorities claim it's all about combating tax evasion.
We even have a case of an importer with 17 vehicles stuck in Djibouti.
Because their accounts are frozen.
It's a mess. And it comes at a really bad time.
Oh, how so?
Remember, the government banned fuel-powered cars?
Right.
So a lot of these importers have switched to electric vehicles.
Makes sense.
And now they're facing all this uncertainty.
It's definitely not a good look for the auto sector. Could scare away future investors.
Okay, let's switch gears again. Remember those long lines for subsidized sugar and cooking oil?
Oh yeah, those were rough.
Well, it seems like technology might be making those a thing of the past.
How so?
These tech-based delivery companies are popping up.
So people can get their sugar and oil delivered right to their doorstep.
Exactly. No more queuing for hours.
Sounds great. But what about the consumer unions?
That's the catch. They've traditionally played a big role in distributing these goods.
And now they're getting squeezed out.
It's a classic example of disruption, right? Consumers benefit from the convenience.
But there are real concerns about job losses for the people who work for those consumer unions.
Like West Union, they lost their role in distributing sugar and oil.
Which is a big blow to their 58,000 members.
It's a tough situation. Raises some interesting questions about how we balance innovation with protecting workers.
Definitely a lot to unpack there. Okay, so are you ready for another story about government actions having unintended consequences?
Always.
It seems like some government agencies and city administrations are exceeding their authority.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
creating a lot of confusion and unpredictability for businesses.
And that's never good for investment.
Nope, not at all. One example that really stands out is the Ethiopian Petroleum Supply Enterprise.
What are they up to?
They want to limit fuel for new gas stations.
To encourage electric vehicles.
Exactly.
Shoes.
Which sounds good in theory.
But there are hundreds of districts in Ethiopia that don't even have gas stations.
Oops.
It's like they're not thinking things through.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Addis Ababa Revenues Bureau.
What did they do?
They've decided to set wage standards for certain industries.
Even though there's a law that gives that power to a wage board,
It's like they're making up their own rules.
it creates this sense of arbitrariness, which is really bad for business confidence.
Okay, so let's shift focus to a specific bank. Oromia Bank. They've been on this big expansion spree,
Opening new branches everywhere.
but it doesn't seem to be working out as well as they planned,
Their profits have taken a hit.
mostly because of all the costs associated with those new branches.
Their president even admitted it was the wrong strategy.
Ouch. Well, everybody makes mistakes.
Mm.
The important thing is to learn and adapt.
And it seems like Oromia Bank is trying to do just that. They're now pushing hard into digital banking.
Which makes sense with how fast technology is changing.
Definitely a smart move. Okay, so we've talked about banks and taxes and regulations and innovation.
We even touched on the human cost of these economic forces.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. And it's amazing how all these stories are connected.
They really are. Government policies, economic conditions, technological advancements, it all weaves together.
And that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating, right?
Absolutely. We get to peel back the layers and see how even small decisions can have huge ripple effects.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one more story we need to talk about.
Oh.
It's a tough one, but it's important to shine a light on these really difficult realities.
What are we talking about?
Scam factories in Myanmar.
Oh, wow. That's heavy stuff.
It is. These are Ethiopian workers who are lured with promises of good-paying online jobs.
Only to find themselves trapped in horrible conditions and forced to scam other people.
It's a really stark reminder of the desperation that drives people to take such risks.
Especially when they're facing limited opportunities and low wages back home.
We have a particularly powerful story here about Shakur.
Who's that?
He's a civil engineering graduate who fell for these scams.
Oh,
He ended up in Myanmar, endured torture and forced labor,
right.
and now he's back in Ethiopia, struggling with debt and physical pain.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is. It shows the dark side of globalization and how vulnerable people can be exploited.
It really underscores the need to address the root causes that make people susceptible to these scams.
Absolutely.
Ugh,
Okay, so we'll pick up Shakur's story and dig into what can be done in the next part of our deep dive.
looking forward to it. Sadly, Shakur's story isn't unique. The UN thinks thousands of people are stuck in these scam operations all over Southeast Asia. It's a really complex problem, you know? A lack of opportunities, poverty, the false hope of a better life that turns into a nightmare.
It really makes you think about the human cost of all this. So what can we do? How do we stop this from happening to more people?
Well, it's a multifaceted issue. We need to create more jobs in Ethiopia, improve wages, working conditions, make sure people are aware of these too good to be true job offers.
It's a big challenge, but it's clear that we can't just ignore it. Okay, let's go back to those expansion strategies we were talking about. It's not just Oromia Bank struggling with this. The whole banking industry is facing some headwinds.
That's right. Increased competition, rising inflation, shrinking profit margins. It's tough out there for banks.
Simply opening more branches isn't the solution anymore. They need to find new ways to grow and stay profitable.
And that's where digital transformation comes in. Banks like Oromia are investing heavily in digital platforms, hoping to cut costs, expand their reach, appeal to a younger, more tech-savvy customer base.
It's a smart move, considering how quickly technology is changing consumer behavior.
Exactly. People are increasingly comfortable with online and mobile banking.
This trend is only going to continue. Banks that don't adapt will get left behind. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today, from banks and taxes to innovation and the human cost of these economic forces.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
Mhm.
And it's amazing how all these seemingly separate stories are actually interconnected.
They really are. Government policies, economic conditions,
Oh.
technological advancements, they all influence each other.
That's what makes these deep dives so fascinating, right?
Absolutely. We get to see the big picture. How seemingly small decisions can have huge consequences.
It's like we're peeling back the layers and seeing the system at work. That's it for our deep dive into the Ethiopian economy. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, stay curious.